kind of background to where we come from. And it's been I think it's a long, long way now to where we are. But what I'm going to say may not directly address the issues that Kumar has raised, but few of the things that Ranjit earlier brought up about the anxieties of today, and more specifically about my own generation. Now, over the last few days, thinking about the points to be discussed today, this has had something of, I think, a therapeutic effect on me. I realize that I'm not, in fact, too anxious about some of the issues to be discussed, especially those that Ranjit has characterized as professional anxieties.
Good to know.
And this is because by the time you are 60, you more or less know what the art world assessment of your work is going to be, at least for the foreseeable future. You know your place. You do not expect to climb the charts dramatically or become an international star overnight. And you make your peace with this, and you continue to work. So this is more or less the position that I think most of my generation and also of the previous generation of artists would find themselves in, though many of them have scaled the heights and have seen gold in their times. But I turn to a slightly different kind of condition when I'm working. When I'm working, I find that there is a tension in my mind between two models of the artistic life as such. In the first model, the artist is striving to break new ground, to advance in his search of his self and the world, and keen to absorb all that is new and also to create something that is new. This is typically the young artist within one and within all of us, even at 80 or whatever. And the second model is the artist wants just to do day after day something good in his art. He is not struggling to get somewhere. There are no goalposts. He wants to just be and do, so that when the time comes to go, there are no unfinished jobs, no regrets. Now, I'm not making any value judgments between these two models. This is just a statement about the tension in my mind and a feeling that with age, many artists tend towards the second model, move towards the second model. This brings up the question of artistic ambition. How do we see, how do we evaluate artistic ambition? For an artist who has moved from the first model to the second model, some would say that he has lost it or that he's burnt out. But the artist himself would probably see it differently, not driven in the same way that he was in his youth, but settled in some other sense. Now, our understanding of artistic ambition is, of course, a function of our understanding of what is valuable in art. Spiritual quest, exploration of language, or social intervention. any or all of these and in different proportions, and artistic ambitions will vary accordingly. Now, art institutions in any period arrange these different ambitions into an hierarchy. They arrange them according to what those institutions feel is the value of art. Now, whether any particular artist's particular ambition fits near the top or near the bottom of this hierarchy will mark your professional fate. But what matters is whether you can find a community, even if it is small, that will support and nurture your particular kind of ambition. And more importantly, whether we could build an art world and an art community which is receptive to these different kinds of ambitions, which is sensitive to the fact that different artists have different ambitions, and the same artist at different ages would have different ambitions. What some artists are doing when they are old, which is no longer cutting edge, no longer at the avant-garde, no longer at the border of where art is. Let us not turn our eyes away from this. I mean, if we do, it's at our own loss that we turn away from this. A last point that I've got here, but I don't know if it's kind of formulated properly. I don't know if I'm clear about what I'm saying. But what I choose to paint, and this is about the way in which I work. What I choose to paint is determined by, when I make a choice, I want to paint this, is determined by personal history, memory, intellectual influences, desires, and accidental perceptions. And the choices I make during work are guided by aesthetic criteria. I use this much maligned word, aesthetic, because I cannot find any other word to express the it works, it does not work, going between this, it works, it does not work process that many artists, I'm sure, follow. And far from being a limited method, this brings into play all that is method. But I suspect that these aesthetic criteria do not today intersect or cross the axes of either of language exploration, which was the guiding principle in the modernist period, or of contemporary social history, which seems to be the guiding principle today. And so I find there are people who like it. I think it is important for me to do it, but where is it? It's not clear in terms of contemporary art history where my work lies, and that continues to be an anxiety. Thank you.
That was actually very, very movingly said, Sudhir. And I have to say that for some of us, as critics or theorists, there is a very related, a closely related anxiety, which is that of bearing witness to whatever is true and most real and most important about our own scene, whilst remaining connected to another scene, which, for whatever it's worth, is a dominant one, where the criteria have changed and these intersections are no longer clearly possible. So it gives rise to a certain almost schizoid sense of having to negotiate between sets of criteria, sets of values, and what is effectively important in what we should really see and be proud of as a vibrant regional context. You know? So I think, and I hope we'll talk about this at some point, there is also a constant dynamic of tension between how we define things that are vital to us if we are to go on with our own practices here, and how these assort with the way in which writing, art making, music, theory, whatever it is defined elsewhere. So thank you for bringing up these topics. I also want to very briefly say that what you said about the two different models of the artistic life put me in mind of a very different, similar but quite different characterization of these choices by Edward Said. And in two truly remarkable and brilliant essays, one of which was called Performance as an Extreme Occasion, which is about the pianist and composer and conductor Glenn Gould, where he talks about how Gould is a very young man, is a virtuoso, and his entire career took place between, as I remember, the ages of 15 and 22 or something like that, and he was done with it. And then he spent the rest of his life through his 20s, 30s, and 40s making the most exact possible, demanding, virtuoso interpretations of great music from the past. And the other, so that is something that he did as a young man, so to speak, which you characterize as what an older artist would do. And then, of course, the last essay that Said published on late style, where he argues that actually, welcome aboard. We'll come back to that in a minute. What was I saying? Yeah, Said, on late style, where he says that at a certain point, an artist, having achieved everything he ever had to achieve, feels the great freedom to do whatever else he wants, actually. So, looking at various examples, he points out that actually it's when an artist has made all possible achievements in his career that he actually then takes risks. He doesn't really care what people think of him or his choices. He breaks new ground. And sometimes when you think of late Titian, a very classical example comes to mind, but you see even the wild freedom of the brushwork and all the rest of it. But this is not the Titian who was struggling to make a name for himself as a young man. So anyway, just thoughts, and I hope we'll come back to them later. But I thought the flow of conversation leads directly to the kinds of questions that Gieve has been working with. So Gieve, could I ask you to come up, and I know one of the key phrases that came up in the discussion around whatever it is that you might be presenting, you've been keeping that a secret all along. But the term birthright, the artist's birthright to solitude, came up once or twice in the discussion. So could I ask you to...
May I sit and speak?
Please.
I'm going to talk about meteor stuff.
Go for it.
We decided that out of all this list of questions, all of which deserve our attention, each of us might pick on something that is most important to one at this point of time, in terms of trying to work out something. So here we go. In 1982, there was an exhibition of contemporary Indian art at the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford. And the director was David Elliott. The show was curated jointly by David Elliott and E. Al-Kazi. In the course of the show and later, we met Elliott a few times. And there were a couple of discussions where I heard Elliott saying, he said, of course, there is no question of trying to figure an artist's authenticity. Or he would say, you can't talk about it anymore. You can't talk about an artist's authenticity. It was like saying that it's bad manners, or that no such thing exists. And now, this, to my mind, is a willful abandoning of critical standards, or it is an inability to fashion new standards for an ostensibly new phase of art. I'll just depart a little bit from the argument and come back to it later. I'm always very, very curious to see what happens when I meet a complete stranger, a new person is introduced to me. And I watch myself watching him or her. And I find that what I'm doing is I'm assessing. So after I tell myself, this is a profound human being, and I must try and meet him or her again. It will be very valuable to do so. Or I'm saying to myself, this is a very charming person, but very shallow. Or I'm saying to myself, here's an operator, keep away from him or her. And all these things come from years of experience of having met human beings and from the instinct of self-preservation. Because if you cannot assess the person you are meeting, you will not know how to conduct yourself in the world. And you'll make mistakes that could be fatal. I've always felt that encountering a new work of art is exactly like this. It's like encountering another human being. And you bring all your past experiences to function. And you tell yourself, what a profound work of art. I must visit this again and again. Or you tell yourself, it's very charming, but rather shallow. Or you tell yourself, oh, this work is a lie. David Eliot and Danto would say, no, none of these assessments are legitimate, and that anything that is on an art exhibition is got to be respected as art. This kind of abrogation of responsibility is not found, for instance, today in the field of literature. In the field of literature, people are still making assessments and writing about them in no uncertain terms. Somebody like J.M. Coetzee will write an essay on somebody as important as Marquez and will say, this particular novel of Marquez is very important, but this particular one fails in respect of this, that, and the other. He's looking at the work of art like he's looking at a human being, and making assessments. Why is the art world abandoning this project? Now here's myself, after all of this, looking at new works of art. And I tell myself, if I'm too lax and generous in my assessments when I see some new work, I will be made a fool of. Because there is this lie, on the wall looking at me. It's lying, that work is lying. And I'm telling myself I have to be generous, Human beings have cheated in every possible endeavor. Why should they not cheat in art? What makes you think that they can't cheat in art? They can. And shouldn't it be one's responsibility and one's self-preservation project to be able to tell when a work of art is cheating? But then supposing I start dismissing artists and works too easily, I may remain merely ignorant and will have missed out on understanding important new works. So how am I to navigate an intelligent middle path so that I may avoid both these pitfalls? That is my anxiety. And a little postscript, which is somewhat related to this. In the production of artworks, always, there are two things, and always have been. There's strategy, and there's inspiration. And I think all artists use a proportion of both. Strategy tells you that I'm Tintoretto, and okay, Titian has been doing this and that before me. And if I'm to make an impact on my society, I have to do something which Tintoretto has not done. So I have to focus my mind strategically to be post-Titian. I'm Tintoretto. Now this is legitimate strategy. I think there's also strategy which I would call not legitimate, which is when I calculate to such an extent that I become a confidence trickster, you know, and I say, today, to make my impact, I have to do A, B, C, D, E, and I'll get there. And believe me, there are artists who are doing this all over the world. There's a profusion of such works. And we should develop our skills to be able to detect this. The other part, which I said an artist is, you know, very much aired to, is inspiration, which, you know, about which books and books have been written, and one needn't go too much into that. But there too, there are two sides to it, you know. There can be inspiration which is legitimate, and there can be inspiration which, alas, is self-delusional. So that too, you know, is a great source of anxiety. How much strategy do I use, and of what kind? How much inspiration do I allow, and how am I sure that it is not self-delusion? Thank you.